You are listening to Packers Talk Radio Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Eddie Lacy, Mike Daniels, Gilbert Brown, Don Barclay, Micah Hyde, your Green Bay Packers, yesterday's legends and today's superstars. From corporate or nonprofit events to private parties, add some spice, hire a Packers player from Mayfield Sports Marketing. For details, just go to PackersTalk.com and click on Player Appearances.
Are you looking for some signed Packer memorabilia?
Look no further than Waukesha Sports Card.
If a Green Bay Packer can sign it, Waukesha Sports Cards has it.
Check our website for upcoming Packer player and legend signings.
So to WaukeshaSportsCards.com.
Welcome to Titletown Sound.
Babo? Who's Babo? Oh, Bobbo! That's me. Present. I'm here. Sorry, my secretary didn't write that down right.
I don't think I'd know Spencer Havener if I tripped over it.
You're the worst. You're the worst ever.
Jeremy, you love my sense of humor, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite ever.
I think Jermichael Finley could be back next year, Jeremy.
Do you?
I also think Omarius Hines could be back next year.
I hate you so much. I hate you.
We chuck it down the field, we run fast, and we score touchdowns. I have nothing more to add. That's it.
Titletown Sound, episode 59, the Wayne Simmons edition of the show. On this week's program, Chris tells his famous gooseberry joke. I'll get my body waxed right here in the studio. And we'll have a special guest analyst. Now, I sometimes forget to mention who we have on the show here. Who are these talking heads that you let into your living room, rather? So let's start there. I'm David Bobke, but in a way, aren't we all? To your left is Chris Christofko. And our special guest this week is Kelly Hodgson. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, nerds. How's it going? For those of you who don't know, there's been a lovely rivalry between Titletown Sound up at the International House of Pocket.
So if you're not listening to Out of the Pocket, you should be, despite the fact that they have a certain hatred for one of the greatest fullbacks in the history of the game, Aaron Ripkowski.
And just so you know, you jerks, when I'm trying to write Rip for something else on my phone, it now defaults to Ripkowski. Just so you know, he has made it onto my phone.
Our job here is done.
Fantastic. Anyways, that said, we don't have Jeremy here this week. Jeremy Vanderlinden usually with us, but he is doing something that's not a podcast, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, his priorities are so out of whack. I think he's like earning money so that he can help his family. Something ridiculous.
He's on the International House of Pocket or whatever the thing was you were just talking about.
Hey, I think last time putting a hit out on me.
Yes.
The deletion is off. all your Titletown nerds belong to us.
I should mention Titletown Sound never endorses anything that Jeremy says or does ever, just for the record. But Kelly, good to have you here with us, filling in for Jeremy. So obviously our expectations will be very low when Jeremy's here. So if you do anything good, you're in good shape with us. And speaking of low expectations, let's talk about the Packers-Lions game. Yeah, not a pleasant game to watch. And let's start defensively. Chris, the defense seemed like they were getting Stafford to run around a fair amount, but no sacks. How do you not sack Matthew Stafford? He's basically got a kick me sign on his back. And
that's a good question. And the last 3 weeks there have been, I don't think they've had a sack in the last 3 weeks. They've lost all 3 games. The pressure hasn't quite been there. I don't know why, because it was so solid in the beginning of the season. But I will say that I'm going to defend the defense. I think they played very well. I think the fact that the Packers punted something like 9 times in a row, 9 times, that it makes it tough on a defense. And there is, and I saw the complaints. Oh, when it really mattered, they couldn't, they couldn't hold them. When it really mattered, they were gassed. These guys have been on the field the whole time. So I really can't fault the defense in this one. I thought they played pretty well. And yeah, the Lions have not been performing well, but they've got some weapons and they've got the ability to light you up a bit. And they really shut down those weapons. So I wasn't upset necessarily with the defense's performance.
Kelly, your thoughts?
All right. I think I agree with a lot of what Chris said. I think we were kind of lacking in the linebacker category. Julius Peppers, who I had very high hopes for in the beginning of the season, really has kind of faded into the woodwork, and that's kind of disappointing. Clay Matthews can't be all places at once. I was very critical of him last year, but he's really come on this year, and he's really become a leader on the field. One thing I noticed about him this game compared to the last home game I was at is he really isn't rushing that A-gap as much as he used to. He would just sneak in and just blast through, and he hasn't been doing it. And they had him drop back in coverage a bit more, so I think they're sacrificing rushing the passer versus having somebody in that middle of the field trying to drop back into coverage. But I agree with Chris. I think they were on the field way too long. They weren't great, but they weren't the problem last week. And I think they just got gassed and exhausted by the end of the game.
And it drives me crazy because that's the typical Dom Capers defense that the game before they look like they don't even exist. And then against the Lions, they look really good most of the game. And it drives me crazy that you have those ups and downs. Now, granted, you have a lot of ups and downs in talent between the two teams they played, but it's frustrating. But I think you might be onto something with Matthews maybe dropping back into coverage a little bit more, not getting the pressure. But still frustrating to see how really well the defense performed, and then you get nothing out of it.
All right. I think I'm kind of with you guys on this too, so I won't spend too much time on it. But yeah, defense. My God, I'm still amazed that we're talking about the defense getting gassed because the offense isn't doing their job. I mean, my gosh. But for this week in particular, we thought this was almost a cakewalk. We thought this was the Packers versus a high school team, basically. And somehow or another, that didn't end up happening. So, Kelly, I'm going to throw this one to you first. Talking about the Packer offense, Aaron Rodgers off his game. I mean, I don't even know what to ask at this point. But, I mean, is there anything that you would blame as much or more than Aaron Rodgers simply not playing well against Detroit?
I think it's definitely a multifactorial thing, and I wrote about this yesterday over at Packers Talk. I think there's a couple things. I think the line is not protecting him. And I think the most telling stat that I saw yesterday was in the first 6 games where they were undefeated, he was knocked down 22 times combined. But if you look at the last 3 games where they've lost, he was knocked down 28 times in just 3 games. You got a very battered Rodgers. I think his shoulder hurt. They finally disclosed that he had an injury yesterday. I don't know, and nobody knows, if it was a pitch count sore shoulder, so to speak, he threw for 61 passing attempts last Sunday, or if it was because he got drilled to the turf a million times. Hard to say, but I think what was really concerning was the week before him saying that he saw Cobb open in the end zone for the touchdown and then saw something that scared him. You really can't have a quarterback seeing ghosts, because that's really concerning, because I think he got paralyzed by his own indecision on the field this past week. You watch him, and he would spin away, pretty much do a 360, and then collapse to the ground with a bunch of guys on him. In past, he would take off running, and it seemed like he wasn't even trying to do that. He was throwing at people's feet. Granted, some of the times when it was a decent pass, the receivers were dropping it. But there were some times where he would throw one way, the receivers would go the other way. They really weren't on the same page. And I think Rodgers always says that the receivers have to trust. They have to earn his trust. Yeah, I think there's an element of truth to that. But I think right now the biggest problem is Aaron Rodgers doesn't trust Aaron Rodgers.
I think you're spot on there. I think the only positive that we can take out of the offense's performance, if you can even call it that, is that we've seen all of these things work better. The wide receivers still aren't getting the separation really that you want, but it's a little better. But there were a lot of drops. There were a lot of missed throws. And it was as if the execution was about as bad as it could have been on the offense. To turn that into a positive, it will improve. I hope it has to improve. That the execution will be better in the future. But it was a lot. There were a lot of poor plays. There were a lot of missed throws. There was a lot of drop passes, and the offense just wasn't clicking. I still don't think that they're in a rhythm when it comes to play calling. I still don't think that the offense really builds, except for that opening drive. Nothing really builds on itself. I still don't think they're scheming receivers open like they need to be. And on top of that, like you said, I think Rodgers is questioning himself. It looks like in these games where we're getting behind that Rodgers doesn't take chances and really doesn't open it up until it's too late. And when he does open it up, he looks great. But it's too late. He's playing too stiff and happy feet, whatever it is. He's afraid of that pocket collapsing. You can't blame him. But I think that some of that's in his head, that the protection has not been as awful as we assume. He's holding the ball a long time. He's just got to kind of trust himself, throw those guys open and throw into those tight windows that he's used to. I know that he's allergic to interceptions, but I want to see him open up his game a little bit, play a little bit looser.
All right. Well, we've got a few more things we want to talk about that are a little less game specific. We'll get to those in just a second. And we're going to talk pick 3 in a moment here. But first things first, we have a sponsor here once again. Titletown Sound is brought to you by the law office of Christopher Schultz. Christopher specializes in traffic and municipal violations, wills, and estate planning. If you're in need of help, Chris has your back. Call 920-252-0692. That number again, 920-252-0692.
And Jeremy talks about he used Chris and his interaction with him, really enjoyed it. It was actually, believe it or not, a pleasurable experience working with an attorney, which isn't always the case. And Jeremy's not currently in jail, so that's a positive as well.
Indeed. Alrighty, on that note, we did talk to Jeremy a little earlier. We're going to get into pick 3 here. And Jeremy's pick 3 were Calvin Johnson, DeAndre Levy, even though he's hurt, and tight end Eric Ebron. And Chris, I'm going to let you go next. The 3 guys off the Lions you would add to the Packers roster.
So I'm admittedly being reactionary because the offense played so poorly, but I'm going to add 3 offensive players. Calvin Johnson, even though he's about 62 in receiver years right now. I'll take Amir Abdullah because he's a young running back that's really kind of coming into his own at this point. I think he's really going to be very good. And then I will take Ebron as well because, well, we desperately need a tight end. Even though we do have Fat White Driver, we could use a little tight end help.
All right. Kelly, you've had a little while to think about your pick 3s. We got 3 people in mind from the Lions.
Oh, but I hate this team. It's making me pick the Golden Tate just because of course, he's screwed us over enough times. Might as well put him on our team and call it a day. I would love to see some shoring up of the offensive line, and even though Riley Reif is not spectacular, we have an injured left tackle right now, so what the heck?
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick, let's see, their place kicker just because of reactionary, and you can't kick in the punter's hand with it all the money on the line.
The great thing is if the Packers ever do get a new kicker, you can finally start watching field goal attempts again.
No, I haven't done it since 1996. Shut up.
I thought it was just a Crosby thing. I didn't know what to
No, the last field goal attempt I saw, and here's the story, is 1996. I was a third-year student, and I was on a clinical rotation, and I was up in Marshfield, and a bunch of us went to a bar to go watch Monday Night Football, and it was Packers against 49ers. It was like, down to the wire game. And it was like, 3 seconds left, and a Jackie field goal would win it all. And that was the last one I saw.
All right, then.
I'm superstitious.
I don't blame. I wish I hadn't watched that field goal attempt at the end of the Lions game.
Oh, I was hiding in my shirt. I was sitting down. I was at the game. My dad's like, "You're not watching." I'm like, "You're darn right, I'm not watching."
It's like many people have said before me, I'm not superstitious because it's bad luck. Love that quote. Anyway, my pick 3, I really don't want to pick any of these guys either, but I'm going to pick DeAndre Levy too, even though he's hurt, because he's a Wisconsin boy, and it'd be cool to see him on the Packers. I'm going to say Calvin Johnson, although I think he really is getting close to the end of his usefulness. He's just not looking that sturdy out there anymore. And I am not a big believer in Eric Ebron in the long term, so I'm going to say Brandon Pettigrew, who I think is still on the Lions. And if he's not, I don't care. So
we take our game seriously.
I'll take whoever the backup tight end is for Detroit. That'll work.
Isn't Pettigrew like 45 years old, though?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so just so you guys know, I'm from Green Bay. My mom is originally from Detroit. I'm sure you've heard mom stories from my brother. Well, but we always go back to Green Bay. Well, I do. My brother lives a million miles away. Go back to Green Bay for Thanksgiving. And when it's the Packers Lions, my mom becomes an insufferable Detroit homer. I'm like, okay, Mom, name a lion not named Alex Karras. And she's like, Megatron. I'm like, what's Megatron's real name? Isn't it Megatron?
Oh gosh, at least she didn't say Optimus Prime.
She wouldn't get it.
Jeez. Alrighty. Well, we do have a couple of Twitter questions we're going to get to shortly, but first things first, we want to talk a little bit about leadership with the Packers. And as I said, this is going a little bit more away from the game in Detroit, against Detroit specifically. And Chris, you wrote an article recently dealing with leadership on this team.
So what I wrote about, and again, this is, I don't have proof for any of this, but I think it's the case. When you watch the way that Rodgers kind of conducts himself in a press conference, and this isn't an indictment on Rodgers, I just think he has a different style, but I think at this point they could use him to work on it. In the press conferences, he does a lot of, when he's asked a question, we'll watch tape, we'll figure it out. If you remember a few years back, and yes, I'm in a way almost sort of kind of going to defend Greg Jennings, but several years back, Greg Jennings, when after he had been jilted by the Packers, kind of said, or trying to, impugned Rodgers' leadership. And he said, but when you hear all the positives, talking about Rodgers, when you hear all the positives, all the time, it's hard for you to sit down when one of your teammates says, man, come on, you've got to hold yourself accountable for this. It's hard for someone to see that now because all they hear is I'm doing it the right way. I'm perfect. In actuality, we all have flaws. Now, look, Jennings was, kind of the jilted ex, and he was a petulant child with the way he left the Packers. But, even in that, there's some kernel of truth, I think. And it was confirmed when Donald Driver responded to what Jennings said and kind of confirmed it. He said, look, sometimes you ask Aaron to take the pressure off the guys so we won't look bad, but he didn't want to do that. He felt like if you did something bad, you'd do it. But I think that's the difference. You want leadership. I think sometimes you may not feel like you got it. You have to earn that respect at the end of the day, and I think that's what Greg was probably referring to. So basically what he's saying is, you really have to sometimes take the blame. It may not be your fault, but sometimes Rodgers has got to get up there and say, I missed a lot of throws. I've got to play better. We all will know that there are other reasons the team doesn't do well. We'll all know it. But what those receivers are doing, or what at least Driver and Jennings were saying, is sometimes you got to get up there and just take the blame. I don't think he does that enough, and I think that it can affect things. It can affect the locker room. It can affect how much a guy wants to play for you, how much a guy wants to go over the middle and get his shoes knocked off catching a pass over the middle when you're not going to take the blame sometimes. Now, I don't care if you rant and rave in the locker room. I don't care if you yell and scream and say you guys aren't playing well enough, but I think publicly sometimes those players want someone to just take it on his own shoulders and say, look, it was my fault. Because we all know watching that Lions game, Rodgers did not play a good game, that he missed a lot of throws, some critical throws, and he just simply didn't play very well. But when he was asked about it, he wouldn't admit it. A reporter asked him if he was beating, he said, you must be beating yourself up about the performance in the last couple of weeks. And his response was, I'm not. Well, I hope he is. I hope he's at least, a little bit ticked off. And he said, what was wrong with the offense? And here's his chance to say, I missed a lot of throws. We've got to play better. I've got to play better. And that's all he has to say. It doesn't have to be anything of substance. Instead, he says, we'll look at the film. We'll make some corrections tomorrow. Really? So how's the film going to, not make you short hop a wide receiver? And that wasn't the only problem. But I just wish sometimes he would take it on himself, even when it's obviously not all his fault. But that's kind of like, he's out there to take the heat so that the rest of the team can kind of, it's not on them. I don't know. And I don't see it enough. You see it with a lot of other quarterbacks, and I think that's the leadership that some want. That's the leadership that Greg Jennings and Donald Driver wanted. Now, in the locker room, it might be fine, but I really do think that it could be an issue.
All right, Kelly, your thoughts on that?
Okay, I've kind of floated this theory, I think maybe to Chris in a message. I think that for the most part, the most successful quarterbacks, the ones that are perceived as leaders, the ones that have the big personalities, are all extroverts. Rodgers, in the way he acts, the way he carries himself, the way he communicates, strikes me as an introvert, which is kind of like oil and water if you're working with a bunch of extroverts. If you watch him, if you're at a game, you can really notice this, is after his play is done, he goes and sits on the bench. and either he's looking at something on the tablet or he's just sitting there by himself for a while. I think where he fails is communicating what's going on inside of his head and translating what he's saying to other people, both in press conferences and with his teammates. Most people who are introverts, and I think we all know them. I'm not one of them. I'm kind of a big mouth. Often are perceived as standoffish or cool or aloof. And sometimes they get the dickish moniker with it as well. But when in fact they're not, but they're just kind of processing it internally. And if people are looking for somebody to stand up and verbalize things, if you're an introvert, I think you fail at that sometimes. But just because you're not saying it doesn't mean you're thinking it. And so that's a challenge for somebody with that type of personality to force themselves to be an extrovert. Is that a problem? I'm just guessing. I've never met the guy. But I think part of the areas where he could improve in leadership style is with his communication.
I don't think you're wrong. I think that I get that vibe as well, that he's not an extrovert. He's not. But all I want him to do is for that 8 minutes a week is to just say, and not always, but when in a game like this, just take the heat and realize that can have some positive consequences on your guys.
Most definitely. I think that comes down to that element of communication where I think he lacks. Yeah.
I think you're right. And I think he's very hard on himself. And as a result, he's very hard on others and doesn't see a problem with that, both publicly and privately, I'm guessing, because he holds himself to the same standard. But I would like, it's funny that I'm saying this, but I would like him to lie to us a little bit. Don't tell us what's really on his mind. Tell us it's my fault. I got to play better. Andy Reid's press conferences were always, and I live in the Philadelphia area, were always the same. They were always maddening because all he would say is, we didn't play well. That's on me. I've got to prepare the team better. That's about coaching. And it's pretty much all he would say. And they would say, time's yours. He would always take the heat.
And if you notice, Mike McCarthy's the same way. You can almost play cliche bingo and, B-17, pad level. But I think that somebody has taught them at an early age not to give anything away in a press conference. A bunch of, well-intended sounding nonsense that doesn't amount to anything. We've got a shoulder. But I think what's frustrating is, a lot of people want Aaron to apologize for his own play. I think, that would be nice. I think, it was on me would be nice. And I agree. I think just a little nod to that, I think would be a reassurance that, if everyone else is screwing up, he knows that it's all 53 screwed up.
Right.
All right. I guess I don't really have anything to add to that. I know there's another element that I don't know what to call this, but there's a crap storm on a Packers writer right now. And Chris, I'm going to hand that one off to you again. Domofsky's article, ball is on the tee, have a whack at it.
So I'm not going to go crazy because I don't think that Rob Domofsky was, an awful person for what he wrote. So if you're not familiar, he wrote 5 reasons that basically the Rodgers might be underperforming. And number 5, this is critical. Number 5 was originally titled Love Life. And it was like a little heading. It said Love Life. And it said, when I talked to an agent, he said when his guys are underperforming, it's usually something at home. And he mentions Olivia Munn by name, but there's no evidence that there's anything wrong. It's not like someone witnessed a fight in the lobby or in the atrium at Lambeau Field. No, it's just saying, well, it could be this. So the problem I have with that is when you call it Love Life and when you use Olivia Munn's name, what you're doing for some people is suggesting that it's the woman's fault that he's underperforming. Was that what Domofsky was saying? No, probably not. What he was saying, I think what he wanted his point to be was there could be something personal causing this that we know nothing about. But if that's the case, what he should have written was there could be something personal that we know nothing about. That's all. Don't speculate and use his girlfriend's name and get into a space that for me really I hate, because if you're on social media or anywhere, women are blamed all of the time when male athletes fail or seem distracted or whatever. And that's where this gets awfully close to going. So the problem that I have with Domofsky is he starts it off calling it Love Life. He later changed it to personal issues or something. So he admits in a sense, that what he did wasn't right, that's not the way it should have been written. And I called him out. Others called him out. Jay wrote a great piece, I thought, on Packers Talk about that.
And Jay caught a lot of heat for writing that, and I thought that he was. I thought that he was very fair and balanced with it. Not to use a Fox term, but it wasn't ad hominem. It was just a counterpoint on why people are twitchy about that type of connotation.
I don't get Domofsky the way he handled it in the beginning, the way he reacted to it afterwards. More than one person told me that their support of Jay's position, my position, your position in this instance, got them blocked by Domofsky. I think it was really the reason that I'm vocal about this is because, and I've told people, I have 2 daughters, and I see things like this, and it really bothers me that when they get older, they're going to face this as well. And someone doesn't perform, and in a high school soccer game, and they're the girlfriend, and they're going to get blamed, but for any reason that they're going to get blamed because they're a woman, and that bugs the hell out of me. So I call people out on it. Not that I matter to Rob Domofsky, but there was enough of a vocal opposition to that article that he actually changed the heading. He changed it from Love Life. So at least that's a step in the right direction, that we have a voice and that it gets a reaction that can actually, cause some change. But I don't understand why Jay was completely, by some, thrown under the bus, why he was, people dismissed his article. That I thought was unfair, because I thought he did a very thoughtful job of covering it.
Yeah, I think it was kind of unfair. Unfortunately, you get some big-name fans who decided that it was unfounded, Twitter outrage or whatever they're calling it.
Well,
then the wind blows the other way.
Exactly.
I warned, I even told Jay, I'm like, you realize you're going to get just flamed for posting this, because I got to see a preview of it. And I speak from experience. I wrote an article last year about being sexually harassed at a Packer game, and I was called everything from a whore, and I had it coming. I'm like, you know what, guys? I'm a 43-year-old woman, at least I was at the time, wearing a winter coat. Don't tell me I was dressed or asking for it, But I respect Domofsky as a writer. He's been a beat writer in Green Bay for a long time. His content is quite good. And I was disappointed by this, because I think, and it may just be his delivery was poor. The heading really did have inferred blame. When you say Love Life and then you say Olivia Munn's name, listing her by name, whether you intended to or not, you just inferred blame on her. And the Yoko Ono narrative is ugly and hateful. And I think Olivia had every right to come out guns blazing this morning. And then, of course, she was told by fans, wags need to learn their place and be quiet and stand by their man. She got disclaimed as well. I'm like, come on, people. Like Chris, I have 2 daughters. I am hopefully teaching them to be strong and independent. Your narrative is not defined by a guy's success or failure. And I think that's why so many people were so sensitive to it, because of the backstory of this. Pandora opened the box and unleashed hell. Eve gave, I'm kind of quoting my brother's article now, Eve gave Adam the forbidden fruit. Yoko broke up the Beatles. It's always, the blame the bitch narrative. And whether Rob intended to do it or not, it was just the delivery of it was poor. And I am glad he changed the header. But I wish we lived in a day and age where blaming the girlfriend is really not the first thing that comes to people's mind.
I'm glad he changed the header, but I wish he would have said, you know what, I wasn't thinking it. It was not my intent. All I meant to say was maybe there's something personal that's bothering him. I wish he had kind of said, sorry, I shouldn't have used that language, but instead he kind of held fast and quietly.
He kind of went on a block party.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I think Zach Cruz of Bleacher Report, he used to write for Cheese on TV, had a great comment yesterday. Unless you have concrete evidence that you can back up, you really shouldn't be bringing someone's love life or personal life into it, because it's just speculation and salacious.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think it was, exactly. That's what it was. And it gets clickbaity, and maybe he had 4 solid points and wanted a 5th because 5 is a better number. Who knows? I was just disappointed. I wish he'd I wish he hadn't been so defensive about it and hadn't, just started blocking people and insisted that it was no big deal. I wish he kind of acknowledged.
Because I think the greatest criticisms weren't attacked. It wasn't like you suck.
Right.
It was just a poor narrative.
There were thoughtful thoughtful statements made to him that were dismissed and that resulted in people being blocked on Twitter. Not that being blocked by a beat writer is the worst fate, but you would hope that if someone's engaging
by
you,
Florio, I probably claim that one.
I've tried 5 or 6 times explicitly to get blocked by him, and he won't. But
Call him a thin-skinned little thing. That worked for me.
but I think.
And if you want to get blocked by Greg Jennings, send him a picture of a burning bridge. I did that too. I just wish that there could have been more of a thoughtful dialogue that Domofsky would have engaged in at that point. That's it. I think, like you said when we were talking before, this has been covered a lot. I just wanted to kind of get my response out there as well, and I think we can kind of move on.
All right. I was going to ask you, Chris, are you going to be calling Rob Domofsky's parents anytime soon?
Not without permission.
All right.
Oh my God, we hit the nadir of journalism tonight. If that was like the news that was breaking at 5:00, it's like, really, we're calling parents?
So if you didn't catch it on Twitter, TJ Lang tweeted that apparently a journalist called the parents of someone on the Packers. I mean, I guess you could probably guess who. We don't know for sure, but I don't think it takes a wild guess.
What do we know about their first names? I can't name anyone else's parents other than Ed and Darla Rogers.
I don't think they were calling Aaron Ripkowski's parents. But so what TJ Lang said was that a journalist called a player's parents and lied, claiming they had permission, and they didn't. And it's just it's a storm on Packers Twitter right now. And if that's true, whoever it is needs to be called out, because that is inappropriate. That's ridiculous. It's inappropriate. Doesn't cover it. It's ridiculous.
It's unprofessional because if you're using subterfuge to get dirt on somebody. And right now, I think everyone is trying to spin the narrative that Rodgers is a head case. Whether Domofsky's got the ball rolling, the fact that everybody's writing about what the heck is wrong with Aaron Rodgers, that it's his parents they were calling. Come on, let's not be coy about it. They called Ed and Darla. But to use subterfuge saying, oh, Aaron said I could call, it's just as unprofessional as you can get. It's shifty, it's nasty, it's muckraking journalism, and it's really inappropriate.
Yeah.
All right. I could be wrong on this, but I don't think anybody could actually call Aaron Ripkowski's parents. I think he was just materialized from myrrh and steel. And he doesn't actually
put it
have
off
parents.
a yeast or something.
Yeah, no. But,
Jeremy, you can totally put me on delete again, but if you do, the NSA will probably come after you. They're extra twitchy lately.
All righty. Should we go to Twitter questions?
Absolutely.
Get ourselves in more trouble. Well, I'll try to get in trouble, and then I'll try to get Chris in trouble. If you ever want to tweet at Titletown Sound, please do. We'd love to hear from you. You can tweet and just let us know how you're doing. You don't have to have a question or anything. But we do have a couple of questions here. And the first one's from John, who is at Packer Fan Stempy on Twitter. Thoughts on Rodgers' shoulder? Because from being hit so much and throwing 60 times. Kelly, your thoughts on that?
Okay, one more time. My kids were making noise. What?
Thoughts on Rodgers' shoulder? Because from being hit so much and throwing 60 times.
The fact that he was saying he was much better today, I think it's a pitch count issue. I think it's a chronic overuse. He's really been throwing the snot out of his shoulder. The biggest hits I saw on Sunday were to his left shoulder. However, every time he goes down, I'm pretty sure he's thinking, oh, God, not the clavicle again.
I agree with you. I mean, I think the fact that he was a full participant in practice on Thursday is an excellent sign. I'm not worried about his shoulder. I'm worried about his head a little bit more. And I don't mean concussions. I mean how much he's
between the ears right now.
Exactly.
The other Twitter question here is from Salvatore Iapolo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I should really try tweeting at these people to make sure I pronounce names right. Feel free to
that
tweet.
Would require work.
That's true. That's more effort than I want to put in. But feel free to throw that in a tweet.
He's the host of his own, I believe he's the host of his own podcast, Italy in Italian. So it's about 5 a.m. right there. So hi, Salvatore.
Buongiorno.
Exactly.
There's the extent of my Italian. I said good morning or good day.
Manicotti. That's about the extent of my Italian.
Pesos.
Nope.
No. I'll try later.
No.
Anyway, at SalioPP on Twitter. I'm just going to pronounce it that way. He says, am I completely off base thinking that Packers struggles are about execution rather than scheme? I'm pretty much agree with that. Chris, you agree? It's more about
Well,
execution than scheme?
It depends on which week we're talking about, because against Denver, it looked like a lot of scheme. But I would agree, against the Lions, the big problem was execution. Between drop passes and missed throws, that offense left a lot on the field. And it should have been an easy victory. And if they executed half of those plays that they missed, they probably win. And Salvatore actually put together a video showing the 16 major execution errors on the offense. I watched it before the show, and he's right. There was a lot of execution. I still think there's scheme issues. I still think they need to scheme those receivers open better, and that could make a big difference. But yeah, there were a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, I think it was probably 85% execution, 15% scheme. I don't know if you guys caught the lip reading Aaron Rodgers on Sunday. He pretty much yelled, "What the F play is that?" Yeah. They weren't on the same page. He didn't like the play, and there were some really dumb, like, you're starting from the parking lot, second down, and like 15 yards on the 3, and they run it. Like, okay, that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, I personally, I don't think it was scheme this past week. However, if the Packers ever institute the triple option offense, you will hear no complaints from me.
Easy.
My kingdom for a screen pass.
Oh my God! And in the second half, they were executing them, and shocker, the ball they were moving the ball down the field. But
yeah, well, let's move on to the next game for the Packers, the Minnesota Vikings. Starting with their offense, their numbers are not real impressive except for the rushing. Adrian Peterson is still Adrian Peterson. They're number 1 in the league in rushing. I think we just played the number 1 team in rushing in Carolina, didn't we? And then Peterson had a couple really good weeks, and so now they're number 1. Passing-wise, though, they're 31st in the league at about 181.5 yards per game. 29th in total yards. This is not really an offense that's going to do a heck of a lot if Adrian Peterson's not doing anything. So, but I believe Peterson leads the league in rushing yards right now, 961, almost 5 yards a carry. So they really haven't needed Teddy Bridgewater to shoulder too much of a load here. They just need him to kind of manage things and just pass the ball every now and then. 28 passes per game, if I remember correctly. So, Chris, I'm gonna ask you about Teddy Bridgewater here. Do you think that he is the real deal and we're starting to see him blossom, or are you like me and you're a total pessimist on Bridgewater and you think he sucks?
I'm somewhere in between. I don't think he sucks. I don't think he is, the next Joe Montana. I think that he will be a serviceable quarterback, probably above average. But I haven't personally seen enough of him. I think he's developing fairly well, but they don't ask a lot of him. With that said, they don't have a lot of weapons around him in the passing game really either. So I think the jury's still out. I think that he is going to be a serviceable quarterback for many years. Will he go to that next level? I haven't seen it yet. I won't rule it out.
Hey, Kelly?
I'd have to agree with you on that. I think he's not as bad as people think he is, but I don't think he's reached his potential. I dread the day he does. But I'll be frank, until Adrian Peterson isn't a Viking, the passing game is secondary to their offensive scheme. The goal for the Packers possibly winning, and I'll be honest, I have very low expectations for Sunday. The goal is to contain Adrian Peterson. I don't care if he runs for 500 yards as long as he doesn't end up in the end zone, and that's how they have beat them in the past. Let him run, let him eat clock, but keep him on the end zone, and I'm totally fine with that.
The thing that scares me about the Vikings is their ability to control the clock with Peterson. So if you're running the ball on this defense, you can tire them the hell out. And that is a perfect recipe to beat the Packers, because with the offense the way it's been.
Yeah, and I agree, Chris. I think you tire out the defense, and that's when you don't need a spectacular quarterback to put it in the end zone.
Okay. Defensively, the Vikings looking pretty good right now. Mike Zimmer, their head coach, was a defensive coordinator, and the expectations were high that he was going to make this defense something, and it definitely is. Second in points allowed, 9th in yards allowed. There's not much of a kink in their armor here. 16th in rushing yards allowed. I mean, that's middle of the pack, really. That's not too bad. And, a lot of pretty talented guys out there. Anthony Barr at linebacker. Xavier Rhodes seems to be doing pretty well at cornerback. So, Chris, I'll throw it to you again. What are your thoughts on the Viking defense?
At this point, the Packers offense makes almost every defense look like the 85 Bears, and that's what I'm afraid of. I don't think the Vikings defense is overwhelming. I think they, like the statistics suggest, they're middle of the road to a little bit better than that. But we can make them look very good this weekend, and that's what I'm afraid of. I've always been very optimistic. The last 3 games have me very pessimistic, and I just don't know that they can, with the way things are going right now, that they can really score much, especially on the road. That concerns me as well.
Well, they haven't done very well
Yeah.
up in the Twin Cities for a couple of years. Even when the Vikings were terrible, they would still lose up there. I worry that they've got Aaron Rodgers' number. I think it'd be interesting to hear the smack talk on the line this week, because I think they're really going to, if there is any credence to him, inside his own head, they're really going to try to get in his head.